All right, I think we can start. Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome from Berlin to our interactive session today. I'm very excited that we have a few people here with us today. Very curious to see from where you are all joining in a bit. But before we jump in, I would like to start with a short welcome round. And you might be wondering who the two people are that you can see here and why we're talking to you. My name is Weronika Perlinski. I'm a project officer at the think tank lab at the German Council on Foreign Relations. And I have been working in the governmental and non-governmental sector for a few years now, mainly at the intersection of communications, especially science communication, capacity building and innovation policy. And I have a background in international relations and European studies, and I'm very passionate about exploring new ways for collaborative and co-creative thinking and working, and this is why we're here today. And with me is my wonderful colleague Claire, who will be supporting me in facilitating the session and who I will pass over now.
Hello, everyone. We are super happy to have this parallel session here today. I'm Claire Lucia Leifert. I have the Impact and Innovation Lab and the Thinking Lab project. Daniela, our director, said a couple of words about our work in this field in the welcome statement. And we are excited to explore a bit further what think tanking in the new normal looks like. And Weronika will facilitate this session.
Yes, thanks so much, Claire. Before we jump into today's topic, we would really like to know, would like to get to know you a little bit better. And for this reason, I would like to ask you to answer the following 3 questions in the chat. What is your name? Where are you right now? And what was your key learning in the last year? It can be personal and or professional. As we only have 1 hour, I will go on now and just quickly want to say 2 things about the think tank lab that you have already heard about in the presentation and the welcoming words from Daniela. So the think tank lab is a newly created initiative by the German Council on Foreign Relations and the Mercator Institute for China Studies, and it is kindly supported by the Stiftung Mercator and the Bosch Stiftung. And its aim is to build a community of practice of think tankers and support the co-creative advancement of think tanks in Germany and beyond by offering training to think tank employees, strengthening peer learning and cooperation in and especially among think tanks, and promoting impact-oriented think tank work. And I would leave it at that. Just a little hint that we have another session on Thursday, so make sure to mark this in your agenda already. And now we will jump into today's session. If you have any technical difficulties, let me know. All right, let's get into today's topic. As we all know and have experienced, COVID-19 has changed the world, transforming the way we look at ourselves and the ways in which we relate to our work, communities, and societies. It has touched on almost every aspect of the universe in which think tanks operate and compelled us to reassess organizational priorities. We have seen changes in the political environment, many civic spaces close, policy agendas becoming monolithic, and research agendas that have taken years to develop maybe losing all sense of purpose, as well as a lot of decrease in funding for a lot of organizations around the world. But there were, of course, also some positive impacts in the last year. I'm pretty sure that many of us have ventured out of their comfort zones to explore new activities, new partnerships, and new approaches to influence policy and practices. And much has changed in our work, and we have adapted to this new situation. But as Claire already said in the beginning, we often talk about the new normal in this context. But the question that arises here is, however, what does this really mean? And don't we want to go back to the pre-pandemic state in some respects, like being able to meet in Berlin today and sharing a coffee and hugging each other and having real life conversations? So today we will explore what has changed for and in think tanks due to the pandemic, to analyze the current status quo, identify positive as well as negative changes and new trends, and to see what the new normal could really look like and how we could perhaps also actively shape it. So this session will be about sharing experiences and learning from each other. And how will we do this? In a sprint, because we don't have so much time, we will take a closer look at the different layers of think tank work. And we will use this circular model as a guide, which you can already see on the screen, and work our way from the outside to the inside, just from the different contexts we are operating in, through practices and products, until we reach the center, the people, us who are working in the think tank sector. For each round, you will get 1 to 2 minutes for individual reflection, and I will ask you to write down your thoughts directly in the Google slide, which I will share with you in a second. And after that, we will have a quick group discussion. You will be able to jump on the session with your video and mic to join us here. And then we will share our findings and cluster our experiences. And I will, of course, say a little bit more about each category once we get to them. So you should all be able to see the Google slide now. And on slide number 6, we will start with the context of think tanks. So I would like to ask you to individually reflect on the question, how has the context in which your organization operates and changed? By context, we mean the relations between think tanks, between you and your stakeholders, you and your partners, but also things like funding policies, etc. And I will set my alarm to 1.5 minutes, and please just fill out those bullet points here. You can just type in wherever you want. All right, let's have a look on your findings. You can also still add things if you want. The need for quick answers. On the top, very good slogan, I guess, for all the layers. New sense of interlinked crisis, aid cuts in the UK. Events have become more accessible, diverse, and tendencies. Donors have become more flexible. Funding restrictions decreased. Expectations realistic. That is a really interesting point, because on the other side, we have fundings that have in general decreased, because some funders have been hit by the economic fallout of the crisis, changed relationships between science and politics, misinformation, of course, an interesting word here. Does someone want to jump into the discussion with us and share his or her thoughts? Maybe the person who wrote that donors have become more flexible.
Sure. I was the one who wrote that donors have become more flexible because we engaged in a strategy almost immediately where we asked for more flexibility from our donors, and almost across the board, everybody agreed. And so, you know, there are various levels of restrictions on grants, and we were able to lower the restrictions, sometimes completely unrestricted programmatically, or organizational unrestrictions. So that was a really big feat for us.
Well, COVID has obviously made it difficult to travel. I think that's one of the key things for me as a smaller think tank organization. I've had to, I was very heavily reliant upon being able to network with individuals in order to build those face-to-face communication channels and establish partnerships. And that has been curtailed. So I've had to use technology a lot more than I thought I would in 2020. Hopefully that will begin to even out a little bit in 2021, heading into 2022.
Much, Paul, and we have another person joining the panel. Hi, Scarlett.
I managed. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm actually just, I'm just stepping in and then I'm leaving you because I'm supposed to take notes. So I'm supposed to be in the background and shut up. But I just wanted to add, just reading the points here, I just wanted to add that I think what is interesting also is that we as organizations, we need to think more and more about mental health of our staffers, which I don't know how widespread was in the past, especially in small organizations, such as many think tanks nowadays are. But I think it has become really a core how we not just how we discuss with our HR department or HR person, but it's really in general for productivity and in general for good functioning of our relationships with staffers. Because, I mean, we hear a lot about Zoom fatigue and all these things, and there have been a lot of studies out there already, which is amazing, actually, how fast these things are put out, saying that we basically do not leave any time between meetings. So it's clear that we are missing that, those bilateral calls, those bilateral discussions, and we are aiming for them, but we just forget that this is not the same as meeting somebody at the coffee machine. So I think we need to invest in this in the future because this will not go away anytime soon.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Scarlett, for sharing. And this is a very good connection to the next layer that we want to focus on. So I will just go on the Google slide. And now we will talk about products. So the same question again, or the same procedure again. How have your products changed due to the pandemic? How has your target group approach changed? Have you developed new formats? What has changed in your portfolio? You will get again 2 minutes to add your bullet points, and then we will come back to the group discussion. Digital formats, digital events with participants in multiple locations, just like today. Digital has allowed us to reach broader and more diverse audiences, colleagues on parental duty, international audiences. Digital events are more diverse. Products tied to news cycle have been more difficult. Think tank has not always been relevant to COVID media. And here on the right side, we also have a lot of digital events, no more printed brochures, which is good for the environment as well, I guess. And who knew that webinars would be so universal and useful? All right, we would like to jump in on the discussion with us here. Maybe also think about similarities. We can see a lot of similarities here, but maybe also differences, patterns. Will you stay with this new products, or will you move to your classic products again?
I think that's a very important question. I don't know what you think, Weronika, Paul, you're still on the panel, because I mean, we're talking about the new normal, and it sounds as if, we've entered a new era. And I think in some aspects we have, but I think in some other aspects, many of us will just, be super happy about having the good old meetings again, where we can actually have a coffee together and, network as we did before. So I'm really wondering which of these products will stay. And which of these practices will maybe, go back to how it was before, or maybe some kind of hybrid thing. Dina, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks so much for the invitation first. Maybe just for the others to know, I used to work for the German Council on Foreign Relations. I headed the MENA program. And since March 2020, I'm a freelancer now. So I'm a consulting think tanks, but I'm also involved very much in the think tank scene. So actually, Claire, I posed the question to you a couple of days ago per email. My impression is that the products themselves, meaning the convening formats, that apart from them being digital, that they haven't changed much. I'm just curious to hear what your impression is. I'm talking particularly about, track 1.5 workshops, where you have policymakers and think tankers attending, or like expert roundtables. I feel like everything is now in the digital realm, but the product itself, how we used to, design these convening formats, it's actually 100% the same as before. Of course, apart from the internationalization of events that are online and so on. So I'm curious to hear, has anyone really experienced or has engaged, in producing differently, like whether convening formats or or publications somehow, because we always talk about innovation, think tanks also have to innovate. Claire, you're heading that innovation lab at the German Council. So I was really curious to hear about the experiences of the others. So is there really something innovative that has happened in the last year? Thanks. I talked a lot. Sorry for my background. It's not my regular working environment. I was kicked out of it.
Paul, did you want to say something? Yeah.
Go ahead, Erica.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll follow you.
Well, I was going to say, Dina, we haven't changed the way that we publish information. I think that has not changed. Obviously, there's the need to become a little more aware of how to use things like AI, and we're not at that point where we can do that yet. But I would say that from our organization, the pandemic has focused more on the intersectional and global issues of racism and economic disparity. And so we've had to really intensify our reading, our study, our research, and our awareness of the overall context of why these racist themes tend to perpetuate themselves in various countries. So I would say it's deepened and strengthened and fortified our knowledge more so than it would have in the past.
Not only the context has changed, but so not necessarily the methodology, as you were saying, Dina. It's more that because there are diverse voices that are able to join us in our convenings, we have different outcomes and results. That's what we found.
Yeah, I think Dina, it's a very good question. I think it's good not to just believe that because we've become digital, we have become more innovative. I think it's really a good question to pose here. And I think what we've observed is different levels of maturity, of digital maturity. And I know that Cast from Clay, they've published on this concept of digital maturity before. It's this question of, do we just try to replicate what we did offline, online? And I think this is the first level. But then the question is also, there are so many digital first formats that could not have been taking place before we all went online and we became so familiar with Zoom and all of this and like Hopin, where we are today. I mean, for example, just this like very little aspect of our conversation right now. At the same time as we are speaking here, we are discussing in the chat, and there's like additional information. There's like publications shared in the chat. There's like a parallel discussion going on at the same time, which I personally do not find distracting, but actually enriching our conversation. And this is something that if we were all sitting in the same room and looking at a stage, it just wouldn't be possible. It would be distracting, like people were just hushing and like talking to each other at the same time as the speakers are talking. So I think this is just a very small aspect, which I think is really adding to the mix. And then, of course, there are so many, as I said, digital first formats for which you need some experience with digital formats, but which are really cool, like hackathons, for example. They have happened in the policy field, and Policy Kitchen, which is also a really interesting format, which I think will be presented here again tomorrow, where you can involve big groups of citizens in developing policy recommendations. So there are lots of formats which really build upon this. And also what Paul mentioned, like working with robots and AI, I think we're just at the beginning of this. But some organizations have experimented and they can share their experiences as well.
So now we have looked at the context and the products, and now we will focus and take a closer look at our work practices. So what has changed behind the scenes? We have already stated a few things and heard a few things, but think about the culture, maybe the structures, processes, internal processes, and also keep the question in mind, do you want to keep those processes the way they are now, or do you want them to go back to pre-pandemic status? I will give you 1 minute now because I have the feeling that we need more time to discuss all the findings. So it's going to be a quick sprint. All right, feel free to still add your points and complete your points. I will already go through the list a little bit. Invest more in emotional and mental well-being. I think this is a very, very important part that also belongs to the category of people. Of course, all of those categories or all of those layers are interconnected. More breaks, which can be a good thing, I guess, or a bad thing if you don't get the workload done. Observe a lot of pressure on people to multitask, especially if you have children at home. We had someone saying earlier before that he has started to write children stories. A lot of pressure because of urgency of questions and lack of funding. It's been hard for people, and will it get better? Very good question. More awareness, understanding for childcare duties. Focus on building our internal community. Also an interesting point, building out our move from in-person to remote to hybrid distributed organization, more openness to try new things. It's of course a thing that we here in the Impact and Innovation Lab and Think Tank Lab really like to hear more about.
We've had to be more agile in terms of working in smaller sprints, if you will, if I can use that software kind of language, rather than working in big chunks because of Zoom fatigue. Have shorter meetings, but more efficient and well-planned and well-structured conversation. Avoid Zoom fatigue.
And would you like to keep that up in the future?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's very efficient. It's very effective. And it allows us to do other things that we need to do as long as we're going to be at home and not out and about. So.
And could you maybe share your best practices? How do you keep your events, your meetings efficient and short?
A lot more thought planning going into the meetings. What is it that we're aiming for? So basically specific questions. If we aim towards very specific questions that we want to answer and let organic and I would say plan more organically rather than having this comprehensive approach to what it is that we need to do. I think it's made us a lot more cohesive as an organization as well.
It was interesting that there were I think it was stressed that there are very different experiences of the situation and the new normal for colleagues who have childcare duties, and they might, on the one hand, experience, this is something that I wrote, my feeling is that they get more understanding and more awareness for that they're not available all the time, that they might have to work different times, etc. But on the other hand, someone else also wrote that there is a lot of extra pressure on people to multitask, especially if you have to juggle work and childcare. And I wonder, which direction this will move. Do you think this will stay with us? Do you think this will, this will go back to how it was before? Or is there anyone among you who has already found like a very good mix of remote working and wouldn't want to go back to the office? What do you think? I don't know who wrote this with the pressure on colleagues with childcare duty. Maybe you want to join in.
I'll add that along those lines, we've invested a lot in management training because that seems to be the key, is helping managers become better people managers so that they know how to deal with each individual and have the tools that they need to actually be flexible, I suppose. We also have done, we did every other Friday off, and then every other Friday, no internal meetings. And that has been just incredible. And we will definitely keep that. So that's not going to go away after the pandemic. Also, I have to say personally, I used to travel back to DC every month for a week from Europe. And that was it. Once I stopped, now I definitely am not going to go back to that kind of schedule, sort of just, realizing, oh, wow, that was a little crazy. But I think other people in the organization are also just going to be less willing to travel because we have so many more tools to keep us connected.
Do you feel that the outcome of your products and your work stays the same, the quality of your outcome?
Yeah, I actually think we actually tried to decrease our productivity because we knew that we assumed we couldn't decrease hours and expect people to be more productive or to have more outputs. And in fact, we just became more focused. And so our outcomes actually became better. So it's strangely improved, but, or strategically, I guess I should say. So I hope that continues.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting sort of subsidiary question, which is how should your work practices have changed during the pandemic? And the point I was going to make earlier is that the pandemic has really shown the importance of working with people in other disciplines and sectors. You know, at ODI, there's a COVID-19 group, and almost everybody's in it because almost everybody is working on some aspect of COVID-19. And so it really needs people to collaborate in new ways and form partnerships outside their normal teams within institutions, which is, I hope, going to last. And then the other thing, and a separate point, is there's been incredible demand for policy relevant, campaign oriented material over the last year, you know, building pressure for SDR redistribution or for additional climate finance or for more support for COVAX. So nobody who's worked in the think tank can be protected from that pressure, really to get in there and get involved in the day-to-day business of policy and probably campaigning as well, or at least supporting campaigners. And for some people, that's great, and it's what they always do. For some people, I guess it's a bit of a shock.
All right, I would suggest to move to the next level, and we already are entering the center of the circle, the people. So you and your colleagues and us, and the question now is, how have you and your colleagues adapted to the new normal? Have you gained new skills? Have you developed new competencies? We have already heard from Weronika that they had training for managers to really support the team managers and staff and human resource management.
I think an interesting question also to add to this people layer is how does recruitment and onboarding work, you know, and also goodbyes. I think all these like life cycle events in the life of a colleague in an organization, I think they've all been very much impacted by the pandemic and remote working. So I wonder how do you deal with that? How does it look like? Does it look the same as before? Or have you invented new ways for onboarding and saying goodbye to colleagues?
All right, let's have a look. And again, feel free to still add your comments and complete your sentences. Wider reading on topics previously tangential. So more understanding of fiscal crisis, modern monetary theory. Now we all know about SDRs. Very good point. And about governing vaccines, new digital skills, definitely remote leadership has become a topic of interest. It's, I guess, a very important topic to be promoted in the future as well. Presenting has become more equitable, more people across the organization are participating, facilitating. People still miss the organic water cooler. Synchronicity, that's true. Yeah, you don't meet anyone for occasional coffee anymore. More internal understanding of organizational finances, fundraising, collaboration across the program has become a lot easier. Bringing in colleagues to meetings is much easier than before. Sharing documents, collaborating online is completely normal now. And someone also wrote that you have seen a lot of fluctuation in the way new employees respond. So a lot of positive things, but also a few negative signs. Would anyone like to jump in on the panel with us?
I went first last time. How about you this time?
Okay. So I think our organizational culture has improved quite dramatically. Not that it was bad, but we've become way more intentional, and communication has improved. We have a lot more open communication. Everybody's participating. So even say operations team members who didn't really present, it was mostly the program people during all staffs. Now everybody's presenting, everybody's facilitating conversations. Just the topics are really diverse. We have community building, that sort of thing. So that has become really amazing. But I would say that people definitely still talk about missing that water cooler feel, just bumping into people, and you just can't replace it with anything digital or online. One other thing, no, I forgot. Go ahead, Bob.
And maybe if I can just quickly add a question. This is Erika. What do you think? What was stopping people before from hosting or facilitating meetings?
I think it's just a lot lower stakes being online than being in person, and it just people didn't have the opportunity to maybe practice, and so just get used to it. But being online is definitely a different experience. It's a lot lower stakes. So, and also we encouraged it, and we really wanted everybody to be involved. So perhaps that helped as well.
Yes, I don't think there's a whole lot to add to that. And just in terms of new hires and orienting new people, who are new, they tend not to be as communicative as those who've been around for a while. And so we've had to come up with ways to pull them in to the life of the organization so they feel very much a part of it, and not just as mentees, but also as contributors. So that's been a very interesting dynamic that we've seen.
I can add a thought about this. I think it's much more difficult for new colleagues to get a holistic view of the organization right now. Even if they have colleagues in their team who might be very thoughtful, and try to pull them in, as you said, Paul. I think there is so much to be read between the lines, just where you see how people relate to each other when they, pass each other in the hallway, and like how does it work? How do people act like when they're in meetings, etc. And all of this is like very different and very reduced in a way online. So I wonder, I don't know, maybe Weronika, you just joined a month and a bit ago, and maybe you want to share like how does it look like from this position of someone who tries to get an idea of how an organization ticks.
Very good point. And I totally agree with you that it's a bit difficult in times like these to get this overview of an organization as a whole. And every time I bump into a colleague here when I'm in the office, I'm super excited and kind of interview them what they're doing and try to picturize the eyes so that I can connect the eyes with the pictures on the website, because behind the mask it's really difficult to see the whole face and to recognize people. So also those kind of personal relationships that are so important to feel as a part of an organization and to be part of something bigger. I think this is very difficult to achieve, and I have scheduled a few virtual coffee meetings, coffee dates with colleagues. So that's definitely a way to deal with those challenges. But of course, it would be much easier to just knock on someone's office and say, "Hello, I'm new here. Can you tell me about yourself?" and so on. So yeah.
Yeah, I also wonder if it has to do with the way our brains work, because I think that humans are wired to have like a more geographical memory, and we try to put people somewhere, this is even like a way we frame it, because if we have a face and it's all on the same screen, you know, we do not really know like who belongs to which team. Like, and if we know, oh, they're sitting in that office, you know, in that hallway, then we have, I think, more of a memory that corresponds with these kinds of, you know, like a map basically of an organization in our head. I don't know if you agree, but this is just a thought that I just had when you shared your experience, Weronika. So this is much more difficult now that we just all on the same screen, on the same layer, you know, super flat experience.
Super fascinating. I've never thought of that, but I think that's really apt. I'm curious how people convey their organizational culture, like in the recruiting process, because we're very quirky. We're very serious about policy, but like we're just kind of a quirky organization. So if you come into our office, you can feel that right away, but you don't really get that online. And you know, early on, I sort of worried like, will they understand our you know, how quirky we actually are? But I'm just curious if anybody has a good way of sort of imparting the culture part in the recruiting process or hiring process.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said. I think it's such a good, yeah, I think the organizations from the outside always look different. And I mean, the way we put up our websites, they're meant for the outside, right? So they don't work that well for getting an insider's perspective on like how the organization ticks and the quirks, etc. So I think it's a good point. So how do we do that? I guess it's like a lot of giving context, like trying to say, like maybe giving a bit more context than we would have done before, because it would not have had to be expressed verbally. But also, yeah, I don't know, maybe others have better ideas. And the same also for the German Council on Foreign Relations. Like, I think from the outside, and also given its history, you know, it's like a big traditional institute. But then if you come in, you see that there are lots of young women, you know, and throwing the show. So this is not what you'd necessarily expect from the outside, looking at the website and everything. But it has moved closer together, I think, the outside and the inside presentation.
Yeah, what an interesting snapshot. It was a very fast sprint. Thanks for bearing with us. But we can see that, in the last year, a lot of things have changed and or still are in flux. And there are a lot of positive trends. We have learned new things, developed new skills. But of course, we also miss all the personal meetings and the non-scheduled chats and coffees and the laughter, maybe over an interesting email from someone or things like that just really add this personal note to working. And I also think that this snapshot kind of gives a lot of inspiration and hope for the future, since there's a few things or many things that have developed that are super interesting to follow up upon in the future and to further develop and to really leverage this potential that has now opened up for us. And as we all can see, change, as always, is a more nuanced affair, and it's hardly homogeneous. So we have all had similar but also different experiences around the globe. And you might be wondering what will happen with this now. And after the session, we will cluster all your thoughts and insights and experiences a bit more, and we'll provide this slide deck as a booth here in the conference, so that other conference participants can also take a look and add their own experiences. And after those 3 days, we will have like a coherent, complete picture of all conference participants that will give us a glimpse into the future, maybe. All right, and to conclude our session, I would like to do a quick chat poll with you. You will get again 1 minute to complete the following sentence. One thing that I want to take from the current situation into the future. And I would ask you to not press send already, but I will count down from 3 so that all the answers arrive at the same time in the chat here, and we can have a nice checkout together. Think global, act global. I hope we can stay as flexible in our minds and hearts and believe in ourselves. We have all shown it's possible throughout the pandemic. Cohesive, diverse, internal community able to better partner with each other to extend our policy impact influence. The courage to try new things and also fail sometimes. Change sometimes comes unexpectedly fast, definitely. Be positive and always stay hopeful. This is a wonderful sentence. Thanks so much. I think this is a very good, these are very good last words. Be positive and stay hopeful. Thank you all so much for joining this interactive session and for doing this little experiment with us as well. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and I wish you a great, great time on this conference. And let's stay in touch and share our experiences and best practices in the future as well.